There's a reason many professional riders are such big fans of Neutrina's Pro Force feeds. Winners align themselves with winners, and they know choosing high quality nutrition is one of the biggest ways to give their horses a leg up in the arena. Pro Force is the only feed on the market with rebound technology that helps your horse recover faster so you can keep winning. All ProForce products also include marine source calcite to support gastric health and help maintain a normal stomach pH. Visit neutrinaworld.com for more information. Fuel the win with ProForce.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a young.
I am a young.
I'm a young.
I am.
And I am a young
Black.
A young black.
Young.
Black.
A young black.
Black equestrian.
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 Black equestrian.
Equestrian.
Black equestrian.
equestrian.
Black equestrian.
I'm a young black equestrian.
I am a young black equestrian.
Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Young Black Equestrians with your host, Ariana Johnson. I am happy to bring you this episode today. You want to know why? Because today we're going to talk about something that I believe is going to, change the opportunity and culture of representation for Black people, not only in the horse world, but in Hollywood. Now, girl, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the movie The Harder They Fall. I recorded this episode earlier this week. And then yesterday, which was Friday, I listened in on what we call Twitter Spaces. If you are familiar with Clubhouse, it's like an opportunity to enter a room, but it's only audio. You don't see anyone. Why was I in this room? Well, the room was titled like The Harder They Fall live chat, but Regina King, Jay-Z, and the director and writer of the movie were there. And so I was like, wow, this is a perfect opportunity, all pun intended, straight from the horse's mouth, to answer some of the questions that I had in my initial episode. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that movie today, and honestly about, the progression or the current kind of trend on cowboys in Hollywood. Now, if you haven't seen this movie, I'm going to do my best to talk about it without actually talking about it, right? I'm going to do my best not to deliver any spoilers. I absolutely won't deliver like the plot twist, okay? But this may give you some insight, because I honestly plan on watching it again. I'll probably watch it at least twice, because now that I listened in on what it is that they were trying to achieve, I can look at it through a different lens, a more informed lens, and with more appreciation for the work that they put into this movie. And so if you haven't seen the trailer, I will put a link to it in the show notes and in the caption of this video. But it's basically about cowboy busted from, jail, and then like it's two cowboy gangs and they're going against each other, and we'll see who prevails at the end. Brief synopsis: a lot of shoot 'em up, bang bang. So if you don't like gore and if you don't like seeing blood on screen, this might not be the movie for you, because it's there. I honestly, in the first 5 minutes, I had to look to see if this was a Steven Spielberg movie, because the blood was just like, and I was like, oh, that's how we're gonna move in this movie. Noted and prepared. So if you don't like blood and gore, either keep your eyes closed in those parts, or maybe just listen to the movie. I don't know. But in watching this movie, I feel like, I mean, we heard about it, what, a year ago? And that was one of the things that Jay-Z was saying in the Twitter spaces yesterday. He was saying how it was such an amazing feat to be able to record and shoot a movie like this, literally in the height of the shutdown. He said the day before recording of this movie, the country shut down. That was early March of last year, 2020. So he was sharing how, they came together with Netflix. It skyrocketed the budget for the movie because they had to introduce all of these COVID protocols that, brought the cost up. You had to take tests and had to have screenings and had to be this far apart and had to change how things were shot. And I think that is incredible. I'm not going to pretend like the people behind the movie weren't already, in Hollywood. Like if Jay-Z says, "How we gonna keep going?" We probably just gonna keep going, right? I'm not gonna pretend like they had, no barriers or anything like that. But it's nice to see, or to learn about how they were still able to navigate it because it was a reality for them. And they still decided to pursue this project despite everything else that was going on. So the director of the movie, his name is James Samuels, and he was really, really, really talking about, the history of the Black cowboy in the American West. 1 in 4 cowboys being a cowboy of color, or specifically a Black cowboy. He made an incredible point when talking about how when we watch Westerns, the Tonto and John Wayne and what is it? It was another like a ranch. I can't remember. My family watches a ton of Westerns. But when we watch those Westerns, we see this construct from Hollywood that makes us think that, this was so old. This was so back in the day. If you were to ask someone, honestly, let me ask you this. Think about this. When you're watching a Western, what time period do you think it's set in? What year? Ask yourself this. What year do I feel like, John Wayne was out there doing his thing? Think about that. Keep that number in mind. The next thing I want you to know is that Bill Pickett, who is a character in this movie, I had to look up this information because I just wanted to be sure because I had a feeling. But Bill Pickett passed away 2 years before my grandfather was born. I'll say that again. Bill Pickett passed away in 1932, 2 years before my grandfather was born. So we're really not that removed from this generation, from this foundational character piece of Black cowboy land in history. Like these things didn't happen in 1700s, 1800s. This was 1900s. This is the late 1800s, 1900s that this happened. This is our great grandparents in their arena, in their time period. So stuff like this is not that old. And, the way that Hollywood has constructed what it is that we see, and we all know, when people put like black and white or sepia filters over photos, it makes it seem incredibly old. They've done that with Martin Luther King pictures. They do that with Malcolm X pictures to make us think that subconsciously think like, wow, this happened so long ago, when truly it did not. These pictures, the originals, were in color. And so it's kind of that another way, cinematically, that people have changed the narrative, that the movie industry has changed the narrative or influenced the narrative of the West and how cowboys were shown and represented during that time. Now, producer, director James Samuel last night yesterday evening in the Twitter Spaces also said that he had no desire to make a Black cowboy movie. He was making a Western. And the reality is that there were Black cowboys and that there were Black Western towns that were self-sufficient and working to thrive on their own. Now, he said that it shouldn't be that dichotomy. It shouldn't be like, this is the reality and this is the Black version, because it's not true. Both happened at the same time. But what was actually shown in the media, before now, that is what has been controlled, right? Like, these two realities happened at the same time, and they didn't happen that long ago. And so when we look at, how the things that we consume and the opinions that we make on how we show up in the media and how we represent ourselves going forward, we have to understand that it's not, reality. It's not, this is how it is for, it's not the horse industry and then, the Black horse industry. It's not always like that. There are going to be, they exist at the same time. And there are going to be differences in the experience, but that doesn't change the existence. It's not like the Black version of anything. We're not living the Black version of this industry, of this lifestyle. We're just simply living it. And so I wanted to also talk about, first, when you watch the movie, like, the movie's great. The movie's truly great. But after a while, maybe like 10 minutes in, you are significantly, if you're anything like me, you are going to notice the use of music in this movie. And it is wild. It's wild to see or to hear how the music truly influences the scene. And James Samuel, the writer of the screenplay, the director, he talks about, he wrote a lot of those songs. And he said in the Twitter Spaces yesterday, he said that, when he went to Jamaica, I think he said like in the 80s or something like that, the Jamaicans were dressed as cowboys because that was like the only thing that was really on TV during that time, or, what they could get. And so he said that there's like a Jamaican esque song kind of in the beginning that, growing up for him, every time he heard it, he heard hoofbeats. He said he grew up obsessed with Westerns. He absolutely loved them. And he actually wrote this movie 10 years ago. But he said that, when he hears it, he hears hoofbeats. And he said that it's crazy for us to not think that there is some sort of like cross inspiration between, you know, Caribbean music and some of the music that was coming through TV from these Westerns. He also made a very good point that I never thought about, that the music that we hear in Westerns, they didn't have that music back then. They didn't have the dun 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 Tonto. Like they didn't have that. When you see a Western and the cowboys are like racing across the plains, the music that normally goes with that, I'm not trying to sing on this podcast to y'all, but you know what I'm talking about. That wasn't cowboy music. That wasn't Western music. That was the music that Hollywood constructed to represent that time period. And so they used a lot of inference from that to say, you know, okay, we want to cinematically choose like a musical experience that many Black people will relate. He talked about how when you are going to a house party and you're trying to find a party and you looking around and maybe you didn't have the exact address, but you know, it's at Kiki's house, that you tend to listen for the music. And the closer that you get, you hear the boom, 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 boom. Closer you get, the more you hear of the music. And so he said he utilized, you know, a lot of those kinds of experiences in how he constructed the soundtrack and the use of the music in the movie. Now, I said it already, but I'm gonna say it again. The music in this movie was fantastic. Absolutely. Like I need the playlist, I need a soundtrack, and I could listen to this every day. Absolutely. But the use of it was so incredible that I feel like if we had the movie without the music, it would not have made nearly as a impact as it did. All right, so that is my. Oh no, wait. Oh, there was one more thing that I wanted to bring up. The characters. So we had Regina King. We had Jonathan Majors. We had what's his name? Lakeith Stanfield. And obviously Idris Elba. We had some other people that were pretty famous in here too. And they were characters that may not have all run together. You know, we don't know that Stagecoach Mary and Bill Pickett were running in the same circles. You know, I haven't seen much history on that, but I would love to, right? But it was interesting to see some of these representations of these characters and personalities that come with them, because you know, if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you know that we talk about, you know, some of these characters. Bass Reeves was there. He was also in the movie. Tom Bass, Bill Pickett. Yeah, we talk about those. We have talked about those people, and historically, you know, how they show up in literature, how they show up in TV, how they show up in movies and things like that. But I think that we do a disservice if we expect there not to be any sort of kind of embellishment, or that is going to be 100% historically accurate. You know, there's been a lot of conversation about Zazie Beetz being the character that was Stagecoach Mary, and how that is not historically accurate. But we also have to ask, you know, is the entire story historically accurate? You know, Nat Love was in there too. Yes, one of the main characters. Forgot that guy. But as we are, entering the realm where apparently Idris Elba is going to be the James Bond of the Black Cowboy movies, because my God, Concrete Cowboys, The Harder They Fall. I mean, the man will play a role on a horse. You know what I'm saying? How do we how do we manage that expectation to show up historically, to tell the true history, while also understanding that it is cinema and it is art and it is embellishment and it is, you know, exaggerating what may have truly occurred? How do we manage that? Let's talk about that more after a word from our sponsors. Nutrina presents an uncompromising approach to superior nutrition. Nutrient-dense Empower products are scientifically designed for low feeding rates. Empower Boost provides an added energy in the form of high fat to help your horses work harder, train longer, and perform better. Digestive balance supports overall gastrointestinal health and helps maintain normal gastric pH to keep them feeling their best. Empower Top Line Balance focuses on top line health and improvement and now includes chromium to support insulin resistant horses. For more information on Empower products, visit neutrinoworld.com. All right, so let's get into it. I truly want to know what you guys think, and you can leave a comment under this video or shoot us a message on any of our social medias. But what do you think about where the responsibility lies for representation in media, in Hollywood? Because in both of the key movies that have come out recently, Concrete Cowboy and The Harder They Fall, there have been, questions about the complete accuracy of the story and how everything was portrayed, right? So where do you think the responsibility lies in having more of a representation for people of color, for Black people in Hollywood? Does it lie on the industry to say, or to seek out and to really put funding towards these projects that are led by Black people? Or is it the responsibility of Black people to continue to show up and to produce projects like this? I don't think there is a right answer, personally, but I'm just interested to see what your thoughts are on a subject like this. It doesn't even have to really be specific to media, because as you know, and as we've talked about before on this podcast, really trying to discuss with people on these different diversity platforms, diversity committees, diversity groups, and saying, this is what we're doing to make our space more inclusive and more inviting, versus this is what I'm doing to continue on in this industry and represent for people who look like me, right? Both are happening, but it's interesting to see where the responsibility seems to lie, because I feel like a lot of times people don't want that responsibility. People, I still see to this day, well, I'm trying to grow the diversity in my program, but they're not showing up. And it's kind of hard to continue to say the same thing over and over and over again. Like, if you don't even know any Black people in real life, how do you all of a sudden think that they're just going to show up in your barn? Like, you don't even know them in real life. Like, what? It's wild. Wild how that happens. So I'm just trying to see and have a little bit of a conversation about where do we feel like that responsibility lies for representation. Got an email not too long ago asking or say, we're gonna discuss some updates on what you have done to increase diversity in the industry. And I really had to think to myself, is that the best conversation? Is that maybe that's just the first question in the conversation, right? It's likely going to, allude to more questions or, you know, hopefully, the conversation will go in that direction because I don't feel like it is the responsibility of the marginalized to make a space more inclusive. That is my personal opinion. And so I truly, when I'm looking at things like these movies, and the criticism that comes from that, it's like, is it fair to us to say, is it fair to them to say, okay, you need to show the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God, but still produce an amazing story? Sometimes these people's lives, nobody's living their life for cinema. Nobody has a storyline that is like building up, climax, and then conclusion. Like that is not how we live our daily lives. So I feel like it's really important to give these creators the space to shine light on a lot of the historical context and aspects of a certain demographic, a certain type of people, a time period, while also giving them the freedom to be creative. Nothing was like a blatant lie, but key examples, Zazie Beetz as Stagecoach Mary. We know that they didn't look alike, right? But did Jonathan Majors look like Nat Love? We don't know that for sure. Did Stagecoach Mary run multiple bars? I don't really remember that in her story. Did they all interact? I don't remember being told that either. So it's like, we do get to pick and choose what we are super critical on. And when it comes to conversations on like colorism and the representation of women in Hollywood, that's where that conversation really comes into play. And so I didn't hear any of that really in the Twitter spaces that happened yesterday, but that's more of the lane that we are more critical on when it comes to that character specifically for that movie. But we didn't really see anything like that in, say, Concrete Cowboys, because we didn't know those characters. Those characters weren't a part of a common history for everyone. Those characters didn't have they weren't really based off of real life people specifically. They were a reimagination of real life people. And so, that brings me to question where does the responsibility of accuracy connect with the opportunity to be creative and to craft a story that will captivate people and that will make them even look into, like, wow, Nat Love, let me look him up. Let me, like, is this real? Is this a true thing? Does this just simply open the doors for more projects like this to be funded? What's that about? I've seen so many people who were, stunt riders and, consultants and were, brought in onto this project to really help shed some light on it and help with the delivery of it. But the director, Jesse Samuels, talks about how a lot of times in Westerns, the women are seen as subservient, or, they don't have a piece of the story without the relation to a man. And he really wanted to hone in on the fact that these women in this movie were their own people. They were their own people, and they weren't subservient to anyone. Regina King, you see her character, she is a boss, okay? A boss. And she makes it very clear that she don't work for nobody, right? But there is a fight scene between Regina King and Stagecoach Mary, and he talks about how, while all the men are shooting and shoot 'em up, bang, bang, the women are throwing their guns down and fist to face. They are fighting it out, and they are brawling, truly brawling. And so he just wanted to craft a scene where the women, they are showing, that they are not on the sidelines of this story. They are not, accessories to this narrative. They are out here in the trenches with the boys, and they're going at it just as much. They're getting hit in the face too. They getting knocked out too. They getting captured and things. So I really appreciate how he kind of approached the role of women in this movie, and how they could be seen just as powerful, just as an important piece of the narrative, um, just like the men. Just like the men. If the women were not there, the story would not have been the same. They were not accessories to the story at all. So, needless to say, I think that there is a fantastic combination of, historical reference and creative kind of reimagination of the American West, and how, in a story, the way that only Black people can tell a story about other Black people. I think that there is a significant opportunity and appreciation that should be given for stories of us by us, which is another reason why we are here on this podcast, right? But I did want to bring up some of the characters that we may not have even recognized or captured the names of, because at first, I picked up the names of the people who I knew already, but some of them I was like, who the heck is that? And is this a random character, or is this like crafted after a real person? And turns out that they were all crafted around real people, but a lot of times there's not a lot of history, or the recollection of that person is from someone else who it just might not be significantly accurate. So Rufus Buck, who is the main character, who is Idris Elba, was actually real. All of them were real, but he was real. He had the Rufus Buck gang, and they did exactly what they did in the movie, rob banks and kill people. And they themselves were also executed. Nat Love, we all know that he exists, but there's also an autobiography by him called The Life and Adventures of Nat Love. You can check that out. And Jonathan Majors says that he read that book several times just so that he could really embody the essence of that man. And if you read that, let me know how you like it. It's something that I am gonna look at, grabbing and reading very soon. Trudy Smith, who was played by Regina King. She was also a real person, but there's not that much information about her. Cherokee Bill, real person. And it's amazing because these people, a lot of them, died really young, but some of them, lived out significantly long lives. I mean, if you get to be 60 years old back in that time, you lived a very long life, right? But it's because they got out of the game. You know, who was it? I can't remember if it wasn't Cherokee Bill because he passed away at a young age, but it was one of the characters. They said that he got out of the game. He became a security guard and like worked on a railroad and did that until he passed. Those are some of the things that we don't hear much about. We hear the fantasizing of their cowboy lifestyles, but again, like I said before, these things didn't happen that long ago. They also continued on to live some, quote unquote regular lives that weren't fantasized as, these crazy cowboy, scenarios. That wasn't their entire life. Bass Reeves, he existed. We know that. He's known for capturing so many outlaws without even, being injured himself. Wiley Esco, he was a real person, but he was a Black US Marshal, and we have almost no information about him. And so those are the stories that are like, okay, although we want to include this person and craft a reality around that, we just don't have enough information. So we put the onus of, the only movies that need to be produced are the ones that are completely historically accurate. We don't have that ability sometimes, and still want to include these characters. James Beckworth, he I think he's the one that became a security guard, but he also wrote an autobiography, The Life and Adventures of James Beckworth. But he went on to be a security guard and work on a railroad until he passed. So I think it's one of the great things movies like this does, and Concrete Cowboys did too, is give the world a glimpse into who these people might have been, and even just brings their image to the forefront, and introduces people to their concept and lets people do their own research, encourages people to do their own further research into who they are as people, what they stand for, and the impact that they've made on not only the horse world, but the world in general. So that is my kind of first take on where we are sitting, Cowboys in Hollywood, and the harder they fall, and really looking at where we are placing the responsibility of representation and accuracy, while also, as a fellow creative, allowing people to flex on that cinematic and kind of grandiose representation of this kind of lifestyle. So let me know what you think about the movie. Let me know your initial thoughts. Let me know of your thoughts after listening to this episode. I know that I'm going to watch it again, and I encourage you guys to do the same, because we always want to support movies that represent the lifestyle that we love and that we are passionate about, and that we want to continue to bring other people in. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you are watching on YouTube, and be sure to share this episode with a friend. And until next week, you guys have a fantastic week. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Young Black Equestrians. Head over to our Facebook or Instagram pages and let us know what you thought about that episode. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and have the opportunity to be featured in our next episode. See you next week.